by your side or in your pocket, and you're good to go.
Okay. I think we'll start if you guys are ready. Don't be shy, you can come in the front row. There's no splash section here. I promise not to try to get you in the splash zone. This is just a recorder. You think so? I can yell, but oh, the fan, yeah. You can take these two back there if you don't have to sit here. You can take the chairs back there. You have? Assalamu alaikum, alhamdulillah. Oh, you don't have
Anybody else need one? Just test it for a second.
Bismillah, Bismillah, Bismillah. Caught me last week. You surprised me at lunch last week. Must look like I was doing some type of Faustian deal or something. Right?
It's just dropped. I heard the ship was going.
Bismillah, Bismillah. Is it registering over there? Bismillah. Bismillah. Is that good? Okay. I can't read like this. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad, Nabi al-Ummi. وعلى آله وصحبه وأزواجه وذرياته ومن اهتدى بهديه إلى يوم الدين تركنا عن محجة البيضاء ليلها كنهارها لا يزول عنها إلا هالك ثم أما بعد. So I'm very honored and pleased to be here for the first, hopefully, of 15 sessions. It's the course, The Footsteps of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the Bukhari series, Part 1. And we said Part 1 because there's about 296 hadith, which I'm going to get into a little bit exactly what we're reading. So we're not going to cover all of that in 15 sessions. We're hoping if we get through 40, then it would be, that's kind of ambitious as well. So I was approached a few months back by the Safina Society leaders, Sheikh Shadi and Brother Ahsan, teach a class here. And this is a class I have taught before. People who used to go to the old NBIC on Remsen Avenue, they might recall in 2004, or maybe 2003, I can't remember now, we did something similar. And whenever we speak about the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and more specifically when we speak about learning and knowledge and transmission of knowledge in general, it's good to kind of think about why we're here and what we hope to get out of it. Because one of the traits of a purposeful person is that they do things with purpose, with aims, with objectives. They don't just do things haphazardly. And that's kind of what separates us from those who walk the earth merely to satiate themselves and to fulfill their passions and desires. And then there are others who walk the earth looking to do what they have been entrusted to do on this earth, namely to be stewards of the earth, to be khulafa, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about our father Adam alayhi salam, inni ja'un fil ardi khalifa, that I will put in the earth a khalifa, a steward who may look after it. And part of the trust that we've been given is to fulfill that trust. And you cannot fulfill that trust without knowledge. And knowledge is one of those things that actually separates human beings from all other creatures. I read recently, I think it was today actually, an article about the V formation that birds form when they migrate, when they fly, and they can't figure out really why. There's one bird in the front, and then they have a V formation, and it's kind of uncanny. All different sorts of species of birds do it, and so they're trying to figure out why. And then they actually said that there's a kind of downwind and an upwind based upon the flapping of the wings of the birds, and so they position themselves exactly perfectly in that spot where they can exercise the least amount of effort to keep up with the other birds in front of them. And they said, that's one of the secrets we're trying to figure out. How do birds know how to do that? Birds don't know how to do that. No one taught them how to do that. This is something that's inherent and instinctual within them. Right? All other creatures besides human beings, they do things instinctually. Birds don't need to be taught how to fly. When the mammal, whether it be the elephant calf or the horse, when the mare gives birth and the horse comes out and then it knows how to stand on all four legs and walk about, no one taught it how to do that. No one taught the bees how to form the honeycombs and how they have each specific assigned roles that they all fulfill. No one taught the ants how to make the ant colonies. No one taught the beavers how to gather the wood and build their dams. That's not a taught thing. That's something they do instinctually and inherently. Animals will only diverge from this when we get involved. Right? When we train them to do something differently, or we get involved in a way where we encroach upon their habitats, upon their ecosystem, upon their way of life, then those things can go out in a different direction. Those are animals. They're doing what they're supposed to do. But as human beings, we have something unique about us, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has endowed us with a faculty to think, to learn, to understand, to feel. Right? We don't really say that an animal feels happiness or sadness. This is more of a human function, a human trait. And it's a uniquely human trait, as we'll see as we go through this course. So we should have a good intention when we come here. There's many intentions we can have when we walk into this place. One of them is, since we are in a masjid, then we should have the intention, and then we'll i'tikaf, that we have the intention that we're here for i'tikaf until the next prayer. Then we'll get the reward until the Isha time is called and we pray collectively. We should have the intention that we're coming here to see our fellow Muslims, brothers and sisters. That's a good intention. And above all, we should have the intention that we are coming here to learn something, that we might come and gain some benefit and also give benefit. Because this relationship between teacher and students is not a one-way thing. Ask anyone who's ever really taught anything and they'll tell you that without the students you can't teach. I could never speak in front of I've tried to do this on the internet numerous times when there's nobody there and you pretend that there's an audience, and it just doesn't work. You have to have that interaction between the two. So I'm here to benefit from you, and hopefully we can have something will be of benefit to you as well. And the way we bring you what we understand of this book or these ahadith, inshallah, is something that I myself understood from my teachers, who understood from their teachers, and who understood from their teachers. One of the things about our Islamic tradition is that it's a transmitted knowledge. It's a revealed knowledge. It's the first hadith we're going to read today, and it's also a transmitted knowledge. And what we mean by transmitted means that one generation upon the next takes this transmitted knowledge, and the amana, the trust they've been entrusted with, is to transmit it to the next generation. Like when the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned these people who even just carry the transmission, not necessarily understand it, but even if they're just carriers of it, it's a meritorious thing. نَضْرُ اللَّهُ إِمْرًا أَوْعَى مَا سَمِعَ. May Allah light upon the person who understands, أَوْعَى مَا سَمِعَ, who imbibes or understands what has been said and passes it on. And then those who can actually implement it and actually put it into practice, that's another level altogether. And they may not be the same person, may not be one and the two the same person. As he said in the same hadith, وَرُبَّ حَامِلِ فِقْهٍ إِلَى مَنْ هُوَ أَفْقَهُ مِنْ أو رُبَّ حَامِلِ فِقْهٍ لَيْسَ بِفَقِيهٍ أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. So perhaps someone who is a carrier of this, here fiqh means not fiqh in the sense we speak about today, but general understanding of Islam, may be carrying it to someone who has more understanding than him. And then, or to be someone who he's not of an understanding, but the person he brings it to is an understanding. So it may very well be that we read some of this hadith, and some of the things I mentioned, you may understand it better than me. Maybe I'm just bringing it, and then when you think about it, meanings come to you, and Allah opens these doors for you, which is quite possible. So that's why these type of gatherings, it's not like any other gathering. We should have the intention in it that we hope that there are futuhat, that there are openings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there are tajalliyat. We see manifestations of the divine will, of the divine presence, as we read these most sacred words, the words of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that not we just read them and understand them, but we imbibe the meanings, and they come part of who we are. Ultimately, that's what my intention is, and I hopefully we can all try to work on that goal together. So, I'm not sure about previous experience here in people's level, if they're familiar with Sahih al-Bukhari is or not, things like this. But basically, the Prophet ﷺ, when he spoke, as the Quran says, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. Prophet ﷺ does not speak of his own volition, it's wahi. And wahi means revelation. And revelation means that it's coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So every word that came out of his mouth, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is a type of wahi. But we classify it in different ways. So that which he spoke of, and he said, this is Quran. And he would tell the Sahaba, he had specific scribes, he would tell them, this is Quran. So record it as Quran. And then he had a general admonition to most of the Sahaba, not all of them, where he told them, what is not Quran, don't write it down. That was a general prescription, but not for everyone, because there were certain Sahaba where he told them, even when it's not Quran, I want you to write it down. This is what we generally refer to as the hadith. And he called it hadith even in his lifetime. He mentioned to Anas ibn Malik on one particular occasion, and he praised him. I believe it's Anas ibn Malik, could be Abu Hurairah. But he praised him and he said about his hirs al-hadith, and his sticking close to wanting to record the hadith. And he praised him for this. So he knew that what he spoke about, which was not Quran, was called hadith. So we call the Quran is wahi, it's revelation, it's kalam Allah, it's the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we call that wahyu ilham. It is an inspiration. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam obviously is an inspired person, inspired man, and so whatever he says has that divine inspiration behind it. But when specifically it's not Quran, then we call that hadith. So there is no one in recorded history who has been recorded about their own intimate personal details of their life how they spoke, how they walked, how they treated others, what they ate, how they sat, what type of clothing they would wear, where they would travel to, the names he gave to his animals. All this is recorded within the Sunnah or the Hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So even just looking from a perspective beyond just our own paradigm, there's no other figure in history, if we want to call it a historical figure for argument's sake, that has as much recorded about him ﷺ, as we have. But then that begs the question, if we know so much about him and we have so many details, then why is it that we see people are making all sorts of claims about who he was, and it doesn't really seem to be that's the person that he was? Why do we have all this strife and destruction and quarreling, especially amongst Muslims these days, especially in parts of the Muslim world, when we have the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and we have the Quran, and the Prophet ﷺ, he is the one who said, you must take the Quran and my Sunnah, عَضُّ عَلَيْهَا بِالنَّوَاجِذِ. He used the metaphor, bite down on it with your primary teeth, and you stick close to the Quran and the Sunnah. But yet we have many people claiming Quran and Sunnah, and they don't seem to be embodying what we would think to be a prophetic character. A character of a man who was at the same time the most dignified of any man who ever lived, but also the most humble, the most awe-inspiring person, but also the most lovable. And it was these apparent contradictions that became embodied in the person of Muhammad ﷺ is what made him a prophet, because they could not have been embodied in any other regular individual. So the answer to the question, it's not an easy answer, but I think part of the answer is what I mentioned in the beginning. This is a transmitted tradition, and not only is the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala transmitted, and the words of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ transmitted, but how we approach those words and what we do with them. It is not enough to just have the text, the words themselves, and then run with it. But the Prophet ﷺ was very specific when he said, نَظْرَ إِمْرَأً أَوْعَى مَا سَمِعَ. So he mentioned people understand, and then they carry it within their hearts. So even though the message, the risala, is reflected in the words, it's not the risala. The risala is embodied in the hearts and then passed on to others from heart to heart. And when we go outside of that particular paradigm, we go outside of that understanding, then we have all of these type of egregious understandings of the Quran and Sunnah that lead people to spurious understandings that no one in the Ummah actually came up with before. And then we have what we call sort of using the religion to advance particular purposes and not the other way around. So people have particular things they want to do, they need to accomplish, and then they mangle and manipulate the religion to fit into those particular parameters that will advance their cause. But if we look at it mujarradan, if we look at it from outside of all those things, what exactly was that message that was conveyed in the Risala of Muhammad ﷺ? I think if we open our hearts to that, then we'll find something quite different. So the hadith, being the inspired speech, inspired from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, is something that there were many, many of them. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And Imam al-Bukhari himself, he said that his particular collection, Sahih al-Bukhari, he said he chose it from nearly 600,000 hadith. And the Bukhari, as it stands today, including the repeats, it's not more than 7,000 or so. So obviously he left most of it out. And similar stories for Imam Muslim, who has fewer hadith. Imam Malik, for example, also said that I kept revising the Muwatta, which was the first book of hadith. I kept revising it for 40 years until it came down to about 500 hadith. And he too had hundreds of thousands of hadith at his disposal. So what we're getting here, if we look at just Sahih al-Bukhari, is what's called a muntata. It's an election or selection of particular body of hadith that embody the prophetic message of Muhammad ﷺ. Now what our Imam here did, Imam Ibn Abu Jamrah, who died in 675 of the Hijrah, he took the Hadith al-Bukhari, the over 7,000 or so, and he brought them down to a little bit less than 300. And he explains in his introduction why he did so. I don't think it's not included in the beginning, but I'm just going to read you part of the introduction where he says, الحمد لله حق حمده والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد الخيرة من خلقه وعلى الصحابة السادة المختارين لصحبته وبعد فلما كان الحديث وحفظه من أقرب الوسائل إلى الله عز وجل بمقتضى الآثار في ذلك فمنها قول صلى الله عليه وسلم من أدى إلى أمتي حديثا واحدا يقيم به سنة أو يرد به بدعة فله الجنة ومنه قول صلى الله عليه وسلم من حفظ على أمتي حديثا واحدا كان له أجر 71 نبيا صديقا والأثر في ذلك كثير ورأيت الهمم قد قصرت عن حفظها مع كثرة كتبها من أجل أسانيدها فرأيت أن آخذ من أصح كتبه كتابا أختصر منه أحاديث بحسب الحاجة إليها واختصر أسانيدها ما عدا راوي الحديث. So he's saying why he wrote the hadith, why he compiled it. He didn't write it, but why he compiled it in this fashion. He said, when hadith and the preservation of hadith are from amongst the closest ways to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. من أقرب الوسائل. The closest ways to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بمقتضى الآثار. Going by all of the narrated reports that came about this. Like when the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever preserves a hadith or takes a hadith, even one that establishes a sunnah or repels a bid'ah, something innovated not from the religion, then they will have paradise, فَلَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. And also when he said, whoever preserves a hadith for my ummah, then he will have the reward of 71 prophets. So he brings out the reason why he did this. Number one, that the great reward and how the hadith is a way towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he mentions why he did this abridgment. He said there's many books of hadith, so why did I need to do this abridgment? He said that people stopped reading it because it became difficult for them, because of the many asanid. The sanad, as some of us may be familiar with, is that first part of the hadith, where it gives the narrator. Most of us, when we read the hadith, as in this particular book, only includes the name of the sahabi, the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, who heard it directly or saw it directly from Muhammad ﷺ. But the sanad actually can go much beyond that. For example, the sanad to al-Bukhari includes 3 or 4 people in between the sahabi to Imam al-Bukhari. And he includes this sanad, because like we said, this is a transmitted tradition. And so the ulama of Islam, they said, if something is transmitted, right, and I want to verify, is it valid or invalid? Is it true or false? But it's something I hear from someone else. They said I have to look to the person presenting me with that particular facet of knowledge. And they said there's 2 aspects that I look at when I'm thinking about whether this person who's bringing me this khabar is truthful or untruthful. One, they call adala, which is their trustworthiness. Are they a trustworthy person? Are they an upright person? And 2 is their dabt. Are they precise? Do they have a good memory? Can they present it in the way that they heard it? Because someone could be an upright individual, but they can't remember a thing. And someone can be, have a photographic memory, but they're a devious person, and they'll make up hadith, which happened in our history. So if both of those attributes are of the highest caliber, then we call that person a thiqah. So when you read sometimes rawahu thiqat, it means every single person in the sanad, in the chain of transmission, is someone who is a trustworthy and precise person in their narration. To my knowledge, there is no other system of precision in determining the validity of reports than what we have with Muslims, this particular system. And our Quran came to us like this, the Hadith came to us like this. The books that we read came to us like this. Don't think it's only a written tradition. Our tradition is very much an oral tradition as well. And being an oral tradition means that it must be transmitted orally. We cannot merely rely on the text itself. Those of you who know a little bit of Arabic will know that Arabic language is non-voweled. Non-voweled means you have to put the vowels yourself, right? If you read a word that says dar, ra, sin, how do I read that? How would I know how to read it? Unless I see it in the sentence. It could be darasa, someone studied something. It could be dars. It could be darasa, someone taught someone else. So that means when I'm reading the language, I am actually actively involved in interpreting what it means. So there's an active interpretation. And Arabic is of that nature. English, you don't have that. English, you have all your vowels there and everything, so you don't really have to interpret as actively as you do with the Arabic language. But you know, in the Mus'haf, the Quran, when you open it up, it has all of the diacritical marks or the tashkeel, right? Someone put that there. That wasn't revealed like that. The first Mus'haf didn't have any marks. In fact, it didn't have the dots either. You couldn't tell the difference between a ba and a ta and a tha. There were no dots. Right now we teach our kids, you know, how do you know the ba? We say B bottom, dot on the bottom, and ta is 2 and thi 3 dots, right? But they didn't have any of that. So there was an active interpretation in understanding this. And that can only be validated and solidified by riwayah. So riwayah means the transmission of these hadith as they heard them. And then the diacritical marks could be put in. This is how the Quran was revealed, right? The 7 or 10 different canonical recitations of the Quran, al-Qira'at al-Saba' or al-Ashr, is by this method, as well as the hadith itself. So if there's active interpretation involved, then there has to be validated transmitters, right, who, number one, heard it correctly, and number two, can pass it on correctly. And some of the biographies have funny stories about people who misinterpreted. I don't know if I told this one here before, but the man who they saw him approaching the prayer, and he had a dagger on his belt, and he had a dead mouse like tied around his neck, and he's walking into the prayer. He said, "What is that? What are you doing?" He's like, "Didn't you read the hadith? Prophet ﷺ used to approach the prayer with sikina wa far." Right? Sikina means knife, and far is mouse. But this could be misread. If you misread the Arabic, it's really sakina wa waqar. Sakina means tranquility, and waqar means, you know, awe or reverence. That's how you should approach the prayer, not with a knife and a mouse. But that person didn't engage in the transmitted tradition. So they read it and they made a mistake. So hopefully what we're going to try to do is go through the first hadith today. How many minutes do we have before Isha? 2? Okay. Which is the hadith, I'll just give an introduction to it and then we'll break for Isha. The hadith of Bad al-Wahi. Well, before I get to that, I should talk about the title of this book. So it's called The Abridgment, but actually the title is جمع النهاية في البدء والغاية. So the first word jama', which means to bring things together, to combine things. Al-bad'i, the beginning, wal-nihaya, and the end. So the hadith that he chose for the beginning hadith and the end hadith are significant. He begins with the hadith that's commonly referred to as Bad al-Wahi, or the beginning of revelation. And the last hadith that he mentions here is about the hadith of people when they enter paradise, and how that is when the ridwan, the rida of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is fully completed and fully realized when they enter into paradise. And that's the story, right? You know, if we look at stories, Lord of the Rings, you know, they lost the ring, they got the ring, then at the last movie they threw it in the fire and everyone, you know, lives happily ever after and so forth. So that's our story. The story is from when the Prophet ﷺ first received that revelation in Ghar Hira, in the mountain of Hira, and then the story, we know how it's going to end, right? There's no suspense here, we know how it's going to end, generally speaking. But the suspense is, how is it going to end for me, how is it going to end for you, and you, and you, and you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us how it can end for us, how it's supposed to end, how we should hope that it will end. And so the author here, Ibn Abi Jamrah, he took this as a way, not just for himself, seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but for those who read it after him, that they make this combination of understanding the beginning, and you understand the ending, and then you understand everything in between, inshallah. So we'll break now for the Isha prayer, we'll come back after that, bismillah.
Allah